vCenter Operations Manager. In this module, we are going to deploy and use the vCenter Operations Manager to assist us with monitoring and with capacity planning for our vSphere environment. So let's get right into this. The vCenter Operations Manager collects performance data from objects within our virtualized inventory or our virtualization inventory. It stores and then analyzes this data. It then uses the results to provide real-time information on problems and opportunities in our infrastructure. So it basically combines many metrics into a score that indicate our environment health, our environment efficiency, and risks in our environment. It then presents these score in what are called badges. So there are two primary type of badges. We have our major and then our minor badges. So these badges are rated with a number or a score. So basically a high score, for example, on a health badge would be a good thing, whereas a high score for a risk badge would be bad. I have a separate section later in this module when I'll get into the detail of the different badges. Both the major and minor badges. So we'll cover that in a little bit. So let me move on from here. In terms of editions, we have four editions for the vCenter Operations Manager. We have the Foundation edition, we have Standard, we have Advanced, and the Enterprise editions. By default, once a license is not assigned for the vCenter Operations Manager solution, the Foundation edition would be deployed. In terms of deployment, the vCenter Operations Manager is deployed as a virtual appliance with two virtual machines. Firstly, we have the user interface VM, and then we have the analytics VM. The user interface VM basically provides the web administration portal for the vCenter Operations Manager. So with this, we'll do our maintenance and management tasks. This VM also contains the vSphere web application, the enterprise web application, and the administration web application. But once we deploy this, we'll take a look at the management administration site and the administration or the admin site for vCenter Operations Manager. And next we have the analytics VM. So this collects data from our vCenter server and other third-party sources. So this is basically what is used to crunch the numbers for events or topology and metrics. So in the analytics VM, we have a couple different components. We have components for capacity and performance analysis. We have our capacity collection. We have a file system database and a Postgres database for are included in the analytics VM. In terms of ports, there are 4 ports that would need to be open in our infrastructure once we deploy our vCenter Operations Manager. Firstly, we need port 22 to enable SSH to the vCenter Operations Manager vApps. We would need port 80 open too. So port 80 would redirect or would be redirected to port 443 to allow access to the vCenter Operations Manager admin portal and the vCenter Operations Manager administration site. In relation to our vCenter server, one deployment of the vCenter Operations Manager server can connect to a single or multiple vCenter server instances. So basically all the communication between our vCenter server and the vCenter Operations Manager server would happen over SSL. Okay, let's take a look at the different badges that we have to monitor our infrastructure, both the major and the minor badges. So let's start off with health. So in this case here, health would be the major badge, and workload, anomalies, and faults would be our minor badges within health. Okay, so workload. This would measure how hard an object must work for its resources, and it is calculated by dividing the demand for the resource by the capacity of that object. Okay, so the lower the score would be better here. So if we have a 0 score, for example, it would basically mean that the resource is not being used at all. Next we have our anomalies. This minor badge would indicate an abnormal behavior. So it works by identifying metrics that are normal from our initial recording or baseline, and then it checks continuously for deviations from the normal scores. So a high anomalies might indicate a potential issue. A low value here would be good. Faults. These badges are this badge is generally generated when bad things happen in our environment. So for example, a loss of redundancy or a failure of some interface. A 0 value here would be a good thing. Okay, so next in our list here we have risks. So risk as a major badge here, and time remaining, capacity remaining, and stress as minor badges within the risk major badge. So the risk badge indicates a potential issue that may turn into a larger problem at some point in the future. Time remaining. This is a measurement of the amount of time before a resource that is associated with an object before that resource reaches its maximum capacity. So the higher score here would be better. Next we have our capacity remaining. This badge is the number of additional virtual machines that an object can handle before reaching its capacity. The objects that are measured here are basically our compute resource. That is our host, our resource pool, and our VApp. So an example score of 100 here is good. 0 would be bad. And finally, we have stress. The stress badge would help us to identify a host and VM that do not have enough resources allocated, or hosts that are running too many VMs. So an example score of 0 here would be good, and 100 would be bad. And finally, for our major badge here, we have efficiency. The two minor badges that we have under this are reclaimable waste and density. So reclaimable waste, this takes into consideration the CPU, memory, and disk resources. So it measures the extent of excessive over-provisioning for an object. An example score here of 0 is good, 100 would be not so good. And then finally, our final minor badge here would be density. So the density minor badge is a measure of your consolidation ratio against the ideal consolidation ratio. Or in other words, how much you are really pushing your virtualization environment. So here you would ask yourself the question, could I really run more VMs with my current resources and have the same performance? Okay, so a score of 100 here is good, and 0 would be bad. Okay, so this is it for the theoretical part. I'll just pull up my vSphere web client now, and then we'll get into the deployment of the vCenter Operations Manager appliance. So here I have my vSphere web client. I'm at home. At the home screen here, if I go over to vCenter Operations Manager here under Monitoring and select this, I have the option here of deploying the vCenter Operations Manager VApp. So basically, if I click on this, it will allow me to provision this vApp. Also, you could, if you click on the export further here, just to take you to VMware site where we can have some additional info on this product. So I'll go ahead and select here. So basically what we're doing here is deploying the OVF with our VMs. Okay, so I could just log in with my VMware credentials here and just download this directly. Or I could go over to the host and cluster view, select my host that I want this to be deployed on, and just go ahead and deploy this. So seeing that we're here, let's just go ahead and do that. So if I go to deploy OVF template here, and just browse to where I have this OVF. I already downloaded this, so I'll just point this to the file here. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and hit on next here. It'll just take a couple seconds and validate this. Okay, so once this is validated, we see here that this would be the name for the vApp, and then it will be deployed with two VMs. If you're doing thin provisioning, it will use up 3.8 gigs of space. If we're doing a thick provisioning, it would use 340 gigs. So I'll go ahead and just hit on next here. Currently, this is the current version I'm deploying, 5.8.5. Okay, so I'll just hit on next. Actually, following this release here, the ones after 5.5, sorry, the ones after 5.8.5, this was rebranded into the vRealize Operations Manager. Okay, so this was the last one that was branded under the VMware vCenter Operations Manager. So I'll just go ahead and hit the next there. I'll accept the license agreement here. And then hit on next. So I'll deploy this to my vCenter to here. Just hit on next. And then I have my configuration here, the environment size. So if I'm doing less than 1500 VM, VMware recommendation is you choose small. Small would require basically 4 vCPU and 16 gigs of memory. This is not a hard setting, so you can go ahead and get it installed with less memory too here. So I'll just go ahead and hit on next here. Okay, so it says here I have insufficient space for thick provisioning. So I'm not doing thick provisioning. I only have like 110 gigs free on this data store, so I'll just choose thin here, and then I'll select next. I'll leave the network to default to my VM network there. The IP allocation, I'll leave this to DHCP. This is just for testing here or labbing, so I'll just hit on next. I'll leave the default time zone setting and just hit on next. And here we have a little summary. So I'll just want to select power on after deployment. So this will power on the two VMs, and then I'll just hit on finish. And we'll just look at the bottom here was this deployer VM. This will take like a minute or so. As I mentioned, once this is deployed, it will deploy with the vCenter Operations Manager Foundation Edition. You can also just get the trial license key from VMware, and you could test the other editions of this too. Okay, so I'll just pause the recording for about a minute here, and then we'll continue once this is finished. Okay, so this took just over a minute to deploy. Let me just come over back to my VM and templates view here. If I click on my data center here, here I have my vApp. Okay, so if I go over to my related objects for this vApp, I should see my virtual machines here. These are the two virtual machines, the user interface VM and the analytics VM. So this one is currently being powered on. Let me just take a look here. Let me come over here so I could expand this out. Or actually, let me just go over back to my VM view here and then come over to my actual virtual machines, and I have my two VM here. If I select one here, this should be running right now. Okay, so it will just take like a few minutes for this to configure itself up. This is one of our VM, and then if we come back here, we have our analytics VM here. Okay, so this one is completed now, so we'll just wait for the user interface VM to come up there, and then I'll go over to connecting to this. So let me just check on this. This should finish any moment now. Once this is completed, when we come over back to our vSphere web client here and go over to vCenter Operations Manager, we should see some additional options here for launching our administration console. But we'll see that in a little bit. Let's just take back a look, see what this is doing. Okay, so this is finished now. Let me just go over back to my home screen here and just select back this. Let's just go to the IP address here that this appliance has been deployed to. This one is at 212, so let me just get to 192.168.92.212. Our default credentials here, username admin, and the password is admin. This is where we'll just do some basic configuration before moving on. Okay, so we are actually bringing in our vCenter server and stuff here. So I'll just point this to my vCenter server, which in my case is at 167. So 192.168.92.167. Then I'll just enter my credentials for this vCenter server. vSphere.local. Once this is correct, we should be able to move on from here. So let me just hit on next here. Okay, just proceed from here. Okay, so here's where we'll change the password for both our admin and the root account. So this is the admin password that we'll use to access the vCenter Operations Manager administration portal. Okay, and below is root access for our appliance. So let me just go ahead. My current admin password is admin. So I'll just enter a new password here. Okay, so here the current user account would be root. Sorry, user account is root. The current password here is VMware. Okay, and then I'll just enter a new password here and confirm this. This should be okay now. Let me just double check here. Okay, so this has changed successfully. I think this one was VMware, not admin. Okay, yeah, so I'll just give a display name for a vCenter server here. Let's just call this vCenter. And the IP address for my vCenter server. So I'll give this the current IP address of 167, and then here the credentials for vCenter server again. Password for this. These are optional here, so we'll just move ahead here now. Okay, hit on next, and then hit on finish here. So once the registration of our vCenter server was completed, we are moved to the admin site here for vCenter Operations Manager. Here we could do some basic configurations. We could set up our SMTP and SNMP, our SSL setup. We can do that here. We could view the status of this. We could restart the services or the service here. We could do a reload here. So say for example we made some changes with our licensing in our vCenter server. We apply some license for the vCenter Operations Manager. We may want to reload it from here. We could also update this appliance, and if we need to change our admin and root password, we can also do that here. So this should be it for this module. In the next module, we'll get into the actual administration of the vCenter server manager. This is just the admin site here, so we'll get into the user interface for that, and then we would do some configurations on in our environment. Before we finish here, let me just pull up that admin console. Okay, I previously logged into this, but once we go directly to that address, we should be able to log into the web interface there. So we'll finish off here, and then once we continue, we'll log into our web interface, and then we can get to monitoring of our objects.